Yeah, so I'm James Ward. I'm a senior animator at Sony Pictures Imageworks, and Leon is right there.
Oh, hi. I'm Leon, Leon Nowlin, freelancing compositor. I think what we'll do is we'll just have James start. I know a lot of you guys are really interested in the animation and game track, I think. So we thought maybe he could start off or lead off with the animation side of things, and then I'll kind of come in with some compositing stuff and then do questions at the end. How does that sound?
All right, so yeah, like I said, my name is James Ward. In the credits, I'm James R. Ward, because there's a lot of James Wards apparently in the industry, so I had to differentiate myself. These are some of the movies that I've worked on. I've also worked on 3 video games, one currently right now because I'm on hiatus because of COVID, but I'm doing freelance work right now, so that's good. So here is my current demo reel.
I love you, Dad. Hey, good morning. How you doing? You going short, huh?
Got some coffee.
Oh my gosh, this is embarrassing. We wore the same jacket.
Hey,
Yeah?
your shoe's untied.
Yeah, I'm aware. It's a choice.
Theory is that all matter is
Things are like this universe, but different, but somehow travel to this universe, but you don't know how?
This place closed 6 years ago.
Oh, it's working, it's working, it's working.
We're doing this all wrong! Smurfette!
I'm close, Clumsy. Almost there.
That's just the Echo playing tricks on us!
Anybody?
Wow, wow, wow. Wow.
All right, so that's some of the work I've done at Sony. A little bit about me. My hometown is Michigan City, Indiana. I grew up in the Midwest, kind of like you guys. And I went to 4-year school at IUPUI in Indianapolis. That's where I met Leon. We both went to school there. So outside of college, that's where you guys are. So that's where I'm going to pick up. And I started applying for jobs. I thought, oh yeah, I finished college. Now I can get into the industry, the film industry. So I sent out my resume and demo reel that I had from school to all the Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks, all those guys. And of course, I got no's from everyone. And ended up landing an internship at a local game studio in Indianapolis called Plow Games. And they just make like budget video game stuff. So I didn't let the dream die. I decided to go to an online school, which many of you may have heard of by now. It's animationmentor.com, but it was just starting up at the time. And it's really nice way it's set up of just there's people who work in the industry that teach it. And so you get to know all the people, all the professors and stuff. And then I was able to go through that while doing the Plow Games internship. And after I did that, I was like, oh yeah, okay, now I'm ready to get it. I've got this new demo reel from Animation Mentor, and now I'm gonna apply again, and somebody's gonna take me. And of course, nobody picked me up either, and I was all distraught, but the dream didn't die. And so I luckily had my sister who lives in California, in San Diego, and so I decided that I need to be closer to the industry, and that might get me, noticed instead of having Indiana on my resume. So I moved out to California and decided to work for about 2 or 3 months on my own stuff to buff up my demo reel a little bit more. And from there, I was able to go to CTN Animation Expo, which is they had a job fair at the conference, and it's just all kind of animation related. They have guest speakers and all these things, and And I took my demo reel there and talked to some people, and Sony Pictures ImageWorks was one of the guys that I talked to, the recruiter. And he didn't have a spot for me on what they were recruiting for, which was Alfred Christmas. But he had the Green Lantern was my very first job. And I was like all excited. I was like, oh, a blockbuster movie. And, you know, Green Lantern didn't end up being the amazing thing that I thought it would be, but, you know, it was still a job in the industry. So I was a junior animator on Green Lantern. And then I just, you know, impressed them, and they kept hiring me after that. So, but a lot of people don't show you what your work looks like when you get the job, but I wanted to show you, even though it's cringeworthy to me, I wanted to show you what my work looked like when I got the job. So this is some of the stuff that I
And whom might you be?
Oh, they call me Little John. Hey, yeah, but don't let my name fool you. In real life, I'm very big.
How to do it, do what to do without you. What to think I do to me, but just with you. What to do it, do how to do without you. You're my all star.
You're pretty beautiful.
Same. I mean, you are too. Oh, handsome.
Do you want a kiss?
Yep.
On the lips, though?
Yep.
Okay.
It's like a predator. It's stalking you. Oh, you can try and outrun it with doctors, medicines. But in the end, time is going to hunt you down and make the kill.
All right, so not as polished as some of my work now, but you can see kind of where I was at the time. So this I'll go over. This is when I get into the industry and when I'm figuring out. So the contracts in film are typically kind of short when you start off. They're about 3 to 6 months. You typically have to move. So if you get a job in like LA, you have to move there for 3 to 6 months. A lot of people don't put you up anymore. They kind of used to, but they don't anymore. They'll give you a relocation fee, so you have some money to get off the ground. So I moved around a lot, like I said. So I kind of wrote it out. So my first move from Indiana was California to work on my reel. Then my first job was New Mexico. Then back to California when it was done. Then I went back to Indiana. Then I got my job in Vancouver working on Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man. So I went to Vancouver for like 6 months. Then back to Indiana because you can't really stay here when because it's really expensive to live here. So when you don't have the money to stay here, you need to move back. So I went back to Indiana, then back to Vancouver for a longer stay for about a year, year and a half. Then back to Indiana, then California to work in games for about a year. And then I went back to Vancouver, and I've been here for about 4 years. So that's kind of the lifestyle to, I guess, expect for a little bit. And when you're breaking into the industry, you move around a lot. So I did work in games. I know maybe some of you are trying to do game development as well. I found out that it wasn't particularly for me, but as a creative outlet, but it's definitely solid work, and I've done it for 3 projects. I worked on The Order 1886, Days Gone, the zombie game, and I'm working on a Medal of Honor virtual reality game right now. So it's fine. I have no issues with it. I'm aware of the workflow and everything. It's just slightly different. You just focus more on particular spots. Like for a year, I only animated faces for the games, and for film, you get to do everything that you see in a shot. So then I came back to film, and I lived in LA for 3 months. So after working in games, I was like, I'm finding out this isn't really for me. They didn't offer me great benefits at the time, so I ended up taking the Sony ImageWorks job in LA and lived there for about 3 months. It was a lot of driving back and forth from San Diego because my wife was still living in San Diego, so back and forth and spending every day in the car. And then we moved to Vancouver, and I've been living in Canada, and I really enjoy it here. I really like the healthcare system is nice, and Canada's not bad. And working at Sony ImageWorks. So since it's career day, I'll say what my day typically is like at Sony ImageWorks. So we're located in Vancouver, BC. I don't know if anyone's ever visited or seen much on it, but it's a very populous city. It's very expensive to live here, but it's really nice. The weather's great. And it's a great place to be. At Sony, we do cartoony movies and realistic movies. So we do VFX work and like CG animation. So we've done like Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs, Hotel Transylvania, really cartoony stuff. But then we've also done like Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home, all those VFX work. So it's one of the only places that you can kind of do both of those. Like Disney, Pixar, and DreamWorks, they only do the cartoony stuff. So where animation fits in, typically in a project, you have storyboards, and then the voiceover is recorded, then it goes to layout, and then animation is right there in the middle, and then after the animation, it goes to cloth, lighting, and then compositing. Compositing is where Liam fits in. And then for animation addressing a shot, so when I first start a shot, you get assigned from your lead your shot, and then you go to a reference phase. So you start off by taking video reference of your shot. Then you'll do a blocking pass, and you'll generally show that to your lead or your supervisor. And then once that gets buy-off, then you go into a polishing step. And then once that gets approved, then you do cleanup. And cleanup is just kind of like if you have like finger animation and one's like intersecting the other one, you just pull it out and just clean up stuff, contacts and everything. So our hierarchy at Sony is that we have the animators, which is like me, and then I have a lead who I show my work to, and then once he approves it, then it goes to the supervisor, the animation supervisor, and then after the supervisor, then it goes to the director, and the director has final say whether the shot gets finalized or not. And a typical day consists of like AM rounds, then director review in the middle of the day, and then PM rounds. So generally, if I'm working on a shot, I'll just spend most of the day just working on my own. And if I'm ready to show it, if I feel like it's in a good place to show, then I'll submit it, and then we'll do the AM rounds and PM rounds and director review. So I just wanted to go over some of the things that I've done personally on, this is for Spider-Verse, which hopefully many of you have seen. So this is one of my shots. This is the burger eating shot. So we all did video reference for every shot that we've done, and this is some of the video reference I took for this one. I'm just devouring this hacky sack.
6 years ago. I don't know why.
So then this is what it ended up being in the movie. It was actually a really fun one to work on. I had done multiple versions of how far his fingers go in his mouth. So there's a version of him just like daintily, just like there, and there's one of like his fingers is like all the way down the back of his throat, and the directors were like totally grossed out, but it was a good gross out. So one of my other shots, let's see. Oh, this is for one I didn't have on my reel, but he drops a comic book on his face. And he grabs it and pulls it up. And this is what it ended up being. So a little bit different. He uses the one hand, and it is very sticky and goes up, but at least the video reference kind of gives you something to go off of. And so this is my last one that I showed video reference for. This one took a long time to get where it needed to go.
But somehow
I'll show the end result.
But you don't know how?
So this is walking around him.
But somehow to this universe, but you don't know how?
I started off trying to do a slightly different take on it. kind of putting more emphasis on one of the lines, and it wasn't quite working. They wanted it to be more kid-like, and so I was trying to put more emphasis on things and break it up, the timing. And so I was doing this. You can see my dog down there. Don't know how. And then this is, I see, there's my baby there. And then I did that little stutter step, and the directors just fell in love with the stutter step thing, the idea, because it felt so kid-like, like Miles did. It was such a good character moment
Somehow
that
travel to this universe,
they picked up on.
but you don't know how?
And they ended up using that, like, that little moment for a lot of other shots that to show off, like, what they want Miles to act like. So I got a lot of praise for that one. So that's all about me and my work. So some advice that I would give to some students would be like post-college education is a good option, like what I did, like Animation Mentor, or there's lots of other options. I list some down here, but it's, you know, it's not necessary if you're self-driven. So you could just skip the whole secondary schooling phase and just go into just working on your own stuff and your own time and trying to get it. But generally, what I've found is that not many people get into the industry like right off of their like 4-year degree. So these are some of the schools for animation specific, and then the Nowlin is one that is for general, I think, like lighting and all sorts of different things you can do. But yeah, so these are some of the animation schools that they have nowadays, and a lot of my friends actually in the industry teach at a lot of these schools right now. So I know a lot of people that teach there. And some advice would just be to be active online, like get on animation sites like I think I list some. 11secondclub.com is a really good one. I actually listed or put a few of my submissions in my student demo reel that I did for that. And you probably know about quite a few of these sites, but yeah, just do some competitions, put yourself out there, and go to like start using software like Maya, Blender, and Adobe Suite. I'm sure all you guys know all that. And to attend conferences like CGRAPH or CTN Animation Expo and job fairs, because that's where I ultimately got my job, was to go to a job fair. And I didn't actually know that you were supposed to like months prior like sign up and like have a booker like meeting time with these guys. And so I just showed up and I was like, oh, I don't have a meeting time, but I was able to walk around and meet with the recruiters anyway, and just got a card from somebody, and that's what landed me the job ultimately. It's really about timing. When they need people, they really need people, and they'll take students or people fresh out of college sometimes. Like for Spider-Verse, we had the most animators we've ever had on a show, and it was like 170 people. So we were hiring people like from all over the place to work on Spider-Verse. And the last one is just to surround yourself with driven people, and don't be afraid to ask for feedback. So like in college, like I pretty quickly realized who was going to be at the computer labs late in the night, and Leon was one of those guys. But like, you surround yourself with the people these are the people that are going to get you jobs later in life. Like I wouldn't have the jobs that I'm working now without the contacts that I made in school and at work. So you gotta just put yourself out there and don't be afraid to ask for feedback, and you know, people will be friendly in the industry if you ask them. So all right, that's it for me, and I'll pass it over to Leon.
Awesome. Okay, so my name's Leon Nowlin. As James said, we went to school together. I thought because this is such a unique experience for you guys, I would start off, instead of talking about myself, talking a little bit about you guys. Just hopefully that's a treat. I don't know. I got a chance to kind of poke around and look at some of the submitted stuff from the students. I wanted to say, commend you guys. I know that this is a very difficult time, and it's probably not the most ideal. So the fact that you guys are really taking this serious and putting your work up there, I just want to say, my hat's off to you for putting stuff together. A couple of things I just wanted to kind of like put a pin in is just as artists, remember that the canvas is as important as the tool. So make your work sing in its container. And by that, I mean, when you are trying to look for a job or ask someone to look at your materials, just be mindful. You want to make it as easy as possible for that person. And so if there's lots of like files for them to have to sift through, that can make them frustrated. So I just wanted to say, Regina, I don't know her last name, I think it's Rafer or something. She had a really nice PDF presentation, which was really cool. If you have like lots of individual images, consider putting in a PDF doc so it doesn't get lost, so a person can look at it at their own leisure and not have to click through. Also, if you had the opportunity to see Miss Tracy Maurice, who's the keynote speaker for today, she had a PDF presentation, which was beautiful. It really helps. Secondarily, looking at some of the resumes, great stuff. I just wanted to say shout out to, I think it's Madeline Lyish. I don't know. I'm sorry for butchering that. Her resume is beautiful. The one thing to be mindful of, some people might be coming from different states or different territories. Resumes here in the US customarily should only be 1 page, and be sure to submit it as a PDF. Sometimes what happens is Word documents, when you send them, it changes the font sizes, it changes the formatting, and so it can shift to 2 pages. People might not see it the way you intended it. So just go ahead and lock it in a PDF. Also, as designers or creatives, you should be mindful that your work should have some kind of effervescence of creativity. But the caveat being, make sure it works in black and white and in color, because not everybody can print in color. And so sometimes it's really hard to differentiate like white on like a bright color. So just make sure you set it to grayscale, check that out. I believe there was a person who submitted something as a character animator, and I just wanted to say, couldn't even give you a shout out because I didn't see your contact information at the head or tail. So make sure you always have your contact information at the head and the tail of your reels. Okay, hopefully that was beneficial to you guys. I will start off by showing my reel as well. So I just wanted to ask a quick question, bonus points, anyone who can get this. Anyone know why my what I just showed you would not be a good submission for work.
I think Maddie said it well. It was maybe past a minute or so, or maybe it was just it wasn't specific enough, maybe.
Great guess. Not quite. A couple of things, 3 things. First, I did not say what my contributions were. I'm a compositor. Yes. Hannah, no info. Oh, that too. Starting with contributions. If I received this, one of my first jobs as intern was to look at the reels that came in and to either put them in the discard pile or to move it on. And sometimes resumes got detached from them. So if you can't tell what the person is applying for or what they did on the shots, the person could be lying and people don't have time to really fact check. So just make sure you're very clear on your contributions, especially as a compositor, because it gets really segmented. We'll go into that later. The note contact information, which I shared, obviously I'm not going to put that here, but just mindful for you guys, always have your contact information at the head and the tail. Once again, if it gets disconnected from a resume or from something else, it should be able to stand alone. And it didn't even say what I do. So you may not have known I was a compositor, but now you do. So those are the 3 pieces of information just to be mindful of. It's beautiful to look at now in the presentation format, but for you guys, I just wanted to be crystal clear that you understood that. So now kind of wanting to move on to a little bit of the summary of what I'm going to talk about. But before I get into that, I wanted to say this little quote. An investment in knowledge pays the highest dividends. I'm kind of in a point in life where knowledge is a pretty big commodity. And depending on where you work at, you'll find that different forms of knowledge don't always get passed on. And so some people are really good with like creative and artistic knowledge or competency. Some people are really good at like business knowledge and competency. And some people are really great at like social cues and knowledge and wisdom and all things social. And it doesn't always translate and people don't always pass the information on. So as you move on in this career, you'll find that sometimes you're applying to things or you're trying to get into like certain avenues and people who have the information to tell you how to get better will not tell you it. So I just want to say, really value not only your contemporaries, but those like Dr. Wagenheim and the staff and the teachers that are putting on things like this, where they're really sharing this information with you, because you'll find people lose that patience once you graduate from school. So be learnable and really invest in yourself and invest in knowledge. And what makes it a little bit tougher is because people's tolerance is low because there's so much information available now. When James and I started and we were in school, things were not how it was now. There was very little information that was out. YouTube, maybe had just started. I don't even know if it was there. So you really had to kind of go through the cracks and crevices to find information. With that information being readily available, people's tolerance is even lower for that. So I'll just give you a little bit of background about myself, go into the industry, talk about professional world, and then we'll get into the questions, both James and I together. I was a person who was really interested in arts. I loved story. I thought I'd go into animation. I loved music. And then I found out I was going to be a starving artist. I did not know what to do with all those things. So all I knew was that every once in a while I'd go watch movies. I kind of enjoyed them. And one day I kind of woke up and was like, hey, movies kind of combine all of those elements together. Is that a possibility? My biggest fear was that I was in Indiana and we did not have films. I don't know if they have films now. I haven't seen any big films going there. It's really great for medicines, really great in agriculture and some of the other sports and athleticism, but the creative arts weren't flourishing. They were pumping out students that had an interest in it, but they didn't have anywhere to go. But I was looking for schools, and IUPUI had just started this program called New Media, which was kind of like this smorgasbord, a buffet of different medias. They had everything we were called tracks, from video and audio to like 2D, 3D animation to story. They had a web track and something else. And so I kind of went into the video audio because I was like, I kind of like this compositing thing. It seems to make the most sense. I did not believe I had enough skill sets or competency to move into animation, even though I really loved it. I just didn't think I was strong enough. And I didn't have artistic like aptitude. I could hold a pencil, but not like throw down like some of you guys can. So while I was at that school, our advisors constantly encouraged us. I have a sad face from you, Christopher. What does that mean? Oh, sorry. Okay. While I was at that school, our advisors really encouraged us to go into internships. And I, not knowing what California was like, thought I should try it out. So during my senior year, I interned over the summer from junior into senior year, just to test out to even see if I was going to like it, because I knew Los Angeles was very different. I knew that there was not film in Indiana or in the Midwest that I knew of, and I was really petrified that I wasn't strong enough to stand out within my own region. So I was like, go where there's more opportunities, see if you'll even like it. Culturally, I knew it was going to be different, and I also knew that it was going to be a different climate, and I was nervous on both of those things. So it was a great way to test the waters. While applying for that internship, I was denied another one that said, we're too full over summer, but if you can come back over fall, we'll have you. I finished the first one. I'm sorry, I didn't finish. I took it, and I was getting ready to come back to school for fall and was like, hey, is there a world where I can finish school, do this internship, and continue my other one? And graciously, the school allowed me to. I had a great rapport with them. They trusted me enough. And so they said, if you can fulfill these things, I've done most of my required schooling. So I just did a lot of independent studies, and they kind of pulled some strings. And so they afforded me to finish while doing school. And I was doing the two internships simultaneously. Those both led, they both led to my first kind of opportunities into work. The first one was for about three months, I believe. And from the first internship that I did over the summer. And then the second one was maybe for like a month at the second place that I did over the fall. So I'm a big advocate of internships. I know today I've been hearing internships thrown out left and right. If you get a chance to do it, even, I'm not going to say like go completely outside of your wheelhouse, but I want to encourage you to get an internship, only in that sometimes the biggest difference between you getting a job and not getting a job is, do you have experience in a studio environment? And so if it's close enough where you're going to get some of those other tangential skills, like working with a client, understanding deadlines, working in teams, if you and you're still being creative, I would say it's probably worth it, just so you can understand what it's like to know what the different cultures are like. Going to this next slide, one thing that I found out very quickly as I moved on from those internships, which led to another job, my first staff job, and then that downsized, and then I went to another company. I went to another company that specialized in animation and live action integration, and all of these companies were completely different. So what I started to find out was every company had its own culture, and when you're interning, that's a great way, low commitment way, to figure out like what's it like to work in different companies. So you can grow your business etiquette and social skills, which I knew I didn't have. This was my first like real job. I had done some on-campus jobs. I'd worked at like a grocery store and, babysat, but like this was my first real job. So I wasn't sure how to like do business things. And I learned really quickly that because every culture is different, you have to like very quickly know how to pivot. Is the company like an artistic run company? Is it a corporate run company? Do they expect you to have like a dress code? It may not be like business formal. it may not even be business casual, but they may have things that they don't want you wearing, and on specific days you can't wear things. I learned that because I was at 2 different places, and had I not been at those 2 different, I wouldn't have understood that there's like a boutique versus a mid-size versus a large size. Also, those different companies had different formats that they worked on, formats being commercials versus music videos versus film versus branded or advertisement or commercials. I think I said commercials, sorry. Or television, sorry, series. And you get known for that. So as you move to like these regions that are a little bit more specialized, they kind of really want you to be to have like a more depth versus a width of knowledge, which is hard when you go to a school, or if you're a person who likes to learn a lot of different things. That's something you have to consider in your kind of artistic journey. Where are you hoping to land? Even like James said, he didn't get there immediately, but that was something he had to be very specific about understanding. He could have went to school and been like, hey, I like CG. I could try all this stuff, but I want to work at Pixar, or I want to work at, DreamWorks, or whichever place he had in his mind to go to first. But if you're trying to go to a larger, like kind of AAA studio, you can't. It's great to have the knowledge and know it in terms of the pipeline and have a conversation, but it's going to do you no good to try to be an expert in all those areas. It's just going to take too long for you to get the disciplines of animation and lighting and coloring and compositing and rendering and TDing and wrangling. Like, those are all their own different disciplines. It's the same thing for compositing. And so visual effects as a whole, you got to think about like, where do you want to land and start kind of focusing in. Do I want to be a generalist? Will my market support that? Those are things I did not understand when I was first starting off. So I learned very quickly that these different companies had different niches. Whether that was based off of the type of formats that they were getting, that was based off of the relationships they had, that was based off of where they were trying to move forward as a company. I hope this is making sense. You guys can ask questions for sure if it's not or whatever. I'll move on to the industry now. Another quote, just because someone else is winning doesn't mean you are losing. So I think in the beginning, when you first transition, you're going to find some of your contemporaries are going to do phenomenal really quickly, and some of you guys are going to peter, and some of you guys are going to be like, this is not for me. It was fun to do in school, but I do not want to do it professionally. Totally okay. Just understand right now, building your brand and entrepreneurialism is really big, which is great. But I think sometimes it fosters a mentality that like, oh, this person is doing better. That means I'm not going to do good, or I have to like, there's this combativeness that kind of happens. And that's not quite the case. What we're finding is that like people are becoming super niche. And because of that, that means like James can have a demographic and I can have a demographic and Dr. Wagenheimer can have a different demographic, and all these different people can like touch different things. And just because that person is excelling doesn't mean like it's not like a zero sum. You do well and I do bad. We can both do well. So just keep that in mind as you're seeing people be successful. You want to celebrate with them because they might be the very person who helps you get your next job, like James said earlier. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with effects at all, but there are, nice, Hannah, great comment. There are different types of effects. They're not going to necessarily say that when you're applying, but just for you to be mindful of, there's this kind of like world of invisible effects. There's the like kind of traditional visual effects that people know of, and then there's design effects. Also, just little tip, if you want to sound like you really know what you're talking about, visual effects are not special effects. Special effects is stuff that's shot in camera. Visual effects is stuff that's done later. Okay. Invisible effects are the ones that you're not supposed to really know are happening. If someone has like bags under their eyes or crow's feet or a pimple on, and you fix that on a shot, you're not supposed to know that that was done. Car commercials have a lot of like reflections going on, or when you're rolling the car in, it creates tracks on the ground, and you have to clean that out. And that's an invisible effect. That's not something that you're going to like glamorize or know that they're doing. Versus traditional effects, we know those. That's like integrating live action, CG, or animation, Who Framed Roger Rabbits, the digis from Cox, etc. And then design effects, which are the things that are like the HUDs, the GUIs, the apps, any of the kind of like techno mumbo jumbo that's going on screen that needs to be composited in. When I first was getting into the industry, these were two separate and distinct worlds. Compositors, even though they were using the same skill sets of compositing softwares and Photoshop and things like that, they were not wanting compositors to apply to motion graphics jobs and vice versa. I'm not saying that you should apply if you only have motion graphics and you want to be a compositor. What I am saying is that there are companies now that are hybridizing those two things. So you can look for opportunities that did not exist before, where they were completely worlds apart. Now there are at least places that are dedicated to them, and you can utilize those skills if you enjoy it. The same, James could probably talk to you a little bit more about this, but I recall for the CG artists, they were really recruiting a lot of people into broadcast. But what people were finding out was they would get in broadcast, they were really good, but they couldn't get out of it because they weren't getting the skill. Like, it was titling, it was like animation, and they couldn't like apply it to like character animation or characters things or film stuff because broadcast was its own world. So again, people are a little bit more receptive of you knowing more skill sets, but you still have to show competency in it. We're very much, if you move towards the West Coast in terms of wanting to work towards film, they very much have to see it to believe it. They won't go off of your word. If you don't show it, they're not going to validate you off of what you say. Erasing or changing skylines. Yes, set extensions are considered like invisible effects. Like, usually you're not supposed to be able to tell that it's an effect. Great comment. Also, when I first started, there was like this huge hardware elitism. Whether you want like a Mac versus a PC, Macs were like the cream of the crop. Like, if you worked on a Mac, you were very professional. If you worked on PCs, you did not know what you were doing. That has changed now. But there's still kind of that perception that, and I know in the design world, it's not so much in the effects world. But just be careful or cognizant of that. If you have not had experience working on a Mac and you've only used PC or vice versa, maybe just get familiar with it. Not that it's a huge deal, but sometimes there's like little keyboard shortcuts and blah, 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 blah that can make it difficult, and it's worth it. Also, there was a software class system. So like node-based compositors, if you're not familiar with that, they're like the compositors that could branch out. Like Shake was big back then. I think it's Nuke now. Fusion kind of was in the run. Combustion, if you remember that, was like the redheaded step brother of like Flames and Infernos. Those were like elite, and After Effects was known as like the baby, like little baby brother compositor. Like, you go roto something or dustbust, which is what I started. I was a dustbuster, cleaning up like scratches that were on film, like real film, that was scanned in, and I had to go in and paint the spots back in. That's what After Effects artists were known for. They would do the roto for other people. They would do like the tracking for other people. So they were like feeders. That's kind of changed. More so, After Effects is a lot of times in the motion graphics pipelines. So if you are only an After Effects artist, just know that sometimes people do have that stigma that they're not going to like believe that you can do like the integration on the same level. It's not you can't, but people still kind of have that stigma low key. Let's speed this up. Okay, I'm just going to kind of go a little bit faster, and maybe we can go back to that if we need to, because I want to get to the questions for sure. Do something today that your future self will thank you for. Kind of moving into the business side. Again, if you did not see the keynote speaker, she was dropping wisdom like nobody's business. So I don't know if I even really want to like reiterate all those same things. I will just say it's important for you as artists to understand this business, or whichever business you're going into, as well as, when I say business, like how are you going to, if this is not going to be a hobby, if you went into this with the intent of, I would like to get paid for this skill set, you need to understand that it is much more than just learning the technical competency. There's a philosophy called the compound effect, where it's like doing little bits of things a little bit every day. A lot of times we try to wait until we have this big chunk of time to do something, and that's what we find is like most times we don't have that time. You're never going to have like 6 free random hours to do something, or in like a whole week to do a task. What you'll find is you have a 15 minutes here, you got 30 minutes there, I've got a lunch break here, I've got some time on the weekend. And by doing that little bit every day, you're building a discipline, which when you look at a month or a year later, you'll say, oh, that project that I thought I wasn't going to be able to get done, maybe it didn't get done, but it's halfway done, versus you waiting for that one day where you can do it all in one sitting and it never comes. I really love that quote. It really applies. Business affairs. I think it's great for you to understand what are your expectations and what are you looking for. This morning, Bake House, that speaker was asking some great questions about what do you want? What are you looking for? And even in the internships, and it's important for you to know that as an artist, what are you looking for? What are you hoping to get out of this? Let that dictate where you're moving, so that you can understand, like, do you have a romanticized view of things or do you have a realistic view? Are you looking to be at a studio, in a AAA studio? James talked about he was trying to apply to like these large AAA places, and one thing, our school, I will say, they were really good at telling us to like look at where you were, look at where you were trying to go, and make sure you like be fair in your analysis. Are you there yet? And in doing so, I made a spreadsheet. And again, that same advisor told me about internships was like, make a spreadsheet and write out the list of places, find other people who have interned at other places, put that on a list. Is it small? Do they have internships? Have they accepted internships people before? And if they haven't, ask them, would they be willing to do so? Because some places are too small. They haven't even thought about like how because the dirty truth is internships take up time from a place. They are investing and depositing into you. That's the difference between an internship and a job. A job, they're expecting you to come in and do something. You're supporting them. Internships, they're supporting you. Portfolios, going through this quick. Portfolios, understand that there are going to be private portfolios and public portfolios. We talked about this a little bit before. Your like private portfolio might be show things that are not released yet, things that you can't talk about, that a company wants to stay hidden, that they don't want public knowledge. And that's something that you keep on you, that you show to a client when you go into a meeting. That's not something you post online, because that can get you in trouble and you don't want to get blacklisted. Versus a public portfolio might be the one like what I had, except for I would maybe show the contributions, additional skill sets, tips. Oh, let me just jump to tips during the downtime. What can you be doing during this downtime is I would encourage you to be growing your skill sets. Learning right now is important. Everybody is doing that. Some of you who have designed, you have some bomb design skills. I saw them. Have you offered to update people's resumes? People are out of jobs right now. Have you reached out to any of your colleagues and said, hey, I can update your resume and design it and make it look awesome? That's work in your portfolio for doing, which should take maybe a couple of hours at most. Also, sorry, I have these notes. I'm going to cheat and look at my notes because I want to make sure I don't forget it. Gain experience. If you know any local bands, like reach out to them about doing EPKs or helping out on their work. I would also say when I say grow your skills, understand that because there's so much information and tutorials are running rampant, you can't just show a tutorial and say, look at my portfolio, I can do this tutorial, I have the skills. A lot of these places are hip to that. They know when it's a tutorial, and if you have not changed it, you're not solving the problem. I admit, I use tutorials all the time to solve problems, but it's usually very specific in how I'm using it. I'm using that process and applying it to a completely different thing. Most keying skills are not, or tracking problems are not gonna work verbatim, one-to-one, the way that they have them glossy and sexy and beautiful in those demos. They work out perfectly off like one click and you're done. In a real world, you get this green screen and it is abysmal. There's no lights, you don't know what to do, and you're rotoing most of it. So understand, if you're going to do the tutorial route, that's great. Saturate your mind with the different processes and ways to do it, but understand you don't put that on your reel. That is just what you use to apply, and you make your own project. And then lastly, get your business affairs in order. I can only hope and pray that, and I believe so with this career day, you guys are learning the business skills. And if you're not, please start understanding what is it like to do like a DBA versus an LLC for your state or where you're going to go. Is it even time to do it yet? The last thing you want to do is be paying into something that you're not ready for. Understanding like logging hours. Have you made an invoice sheet for yourself? Do you have a tracking or file management system for yourself internally? If you're going to be working remotely, understand you are your own IT. You are the person who has to solve all these problems. So you have to know how to troubleshoot this. Our school is really good at helping people or making sure they knew how to troubleshoot problems. But I have to admit, I was not privy or hip to the business side. I was like this, I just wanted it to look good and I wanted it to be pretty, and that was my focus. And so I had to do a lot of catching up and understanding the business side. So I encourage you guys during this downtime, use it to learn business etiquette, marketing. And when I say marketing, it's just like, what is it like to market yourself as a brand or to market your work as a brand? And that's not just throw it on social media and it's done. Social media has a time and a place, and it works well for certain things, but for some of you, it may not be. Okay, I'm really wrapping this up. I had one other thing. There was a couple little nuggets that I heard today that I just wanted to share with you if you did not get a chance to. Aaron Truesdale said, try to find a nugget of passion in every task. It will show through. There's going to be times when you're sludging through it and it's a slush pile and you hate it. Try to find something passionate about it if you can, even if it's the end result. Sometimes the most tangential skill is the skill that you're going to need in the next opportunity. I guarantee it's happened several times. I didn't know how to track, and then I learned it, and then the next job was like, hey, you could track really well. And I was like, I just learned on this other job. I didn't tell them that, but that's what got me the opportunity. Big house, what are you looking for? Again, as you transition out of student to job and looking for jobs, that is going to be something that's going to come up. And if you do not know, if you can't answer it, you're wasting their time. Mr. Mola said, it's never been a greater time to be creative, and he's absolutely right. The only thing that makes it difficult is it's incredibly hard to stand out. So Mr. Luke Ramsey said he sends out personalized message cards, and someone asked him, is that something that they should do? And he said, I can't really quite answer that, and I believe he's right. What he was saying was, you have to find your own unique selling point as an artist. It might be that you're on social media. It might be that you call people. It might be that you send out the cards, one-on-one personalized. You have to find out what that is for you that makes you unique and makes you stand out. But it is worth finding and investing. Otherwise, you're going to be another artist in a sea of artists.
So I really wanted to ask this for you guys. So when you guys are working on a longer shot, what do you do to kind of keep yourself motivated? Because I know with animation and most likely with compositing, it could take maybe like a month or two on those shots. So like I said, what do you do to kind of maintain that motivation when you're working on something for so long?
Yes, that's a great question. In fact, a lot of times I kind of the one who likes to have a lot of things to help diversify, at least at the beginning, because the last kind of what they say is like the last 10% usually takes the most amount of time. So you can get up to like 80, 85% pretty quickly. And then that last bit when you're finalizing is the part that can take, the weeks on end. And I think sometimes if you have a good supervisor, they're actually really good at knowing when you need a break. They will help pace it out for you, or they'll give you something they'll kind of do check-ins. We have dailies. Every company, and we talked about culture, every company is different. Their dailies might not actually be daily. Sometimes it's like weekly, but they do these check-ins and kind of like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How are you pacing yourself? And so sometimes you will get burnt out, like if you're just looking at it over and over. And that, someone made the comment about getting feedbacks. I think it might have been James. Feedback is important because sometimes you're noodling on things that other people are like, it's good, bro. Like, just keep it pushing. And you see it, but when you look at it in context, remember you're working on it, you're seeing it over and over repetitively. When other people are seeing it, they're going to see it so quickly, you kind of get lost in the forest for the trees. So I think that feedback is really important. Being honest during those dailies, when you have a good supervisor, they're going to be good at coming to you, or just sometimes it's a matter of switching tasks. So like even in compositing, like some people like roto, some people don't. in a shot, you might have like a little bit of roto, a little bit of keying, a little bit of this, like all in the same shot. So sometimes you just like put some of your stuff on that day when you need to like just zone out on something that's too difficult or taxing. And you can say, I just need to turn on some music and just like, let me just roto this girl's hair while I'm, and I can just not think about like, how am I going to color correct this and blah, 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 that. So a lot of that skill set, like management, comes with you doing it repetitively. The only other thing I could say is you do get sometimes more than one shot. So they'll kind of try to throw you some bones so you got some easy ones. So you can kind of be like, oh, I need a breather, or let me go to something else. But again, it goes back to that culture. If you have a good place, they're going to be good at having that conversation with you. I hope that answers or helps it.
I answered that very well. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Great question.